All right, last panel of the day. No pressure, I guess. Let's close strong. I think it's a good topic, so it won't be too hard to have a really lively, engaging conversation about this. Here's a question for the panel. We can start maybe left to right, my left. What role do you think branding plays? When we're talking about startups going up against the big tech giants, whether that's Google, maybe we'll set our sights a bit lower than that. Perhaps you're in a particular category of AI and you're trying to compete against a better funded rival, right? So, what role does branding play, and kind of what strategies are you seeing startups take when it comes to standing out in all of the noise, because there's so much noise in the AI space these days?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. So, hi everyone, I'm Cristina from Linear. I would say from a branding perspective, it's really critical for companies very early on to build their brand. And I think every company tends to do this in a very different way. It's really about finding like that initial area where you can build your product market fit and have people hear about your product for the first time. And then figuring out where you kind of take it into like further concentric circles outward. So, I've been at companies that have started this and done this in very different ways. When I was at Stripe, we were competing in a very competitive market with payments, and we started building up a brand in like Hacker News and like smaller like forums on Twitter when it was just getting started. And now, for Linear, it was a different world, right? So you can't just take the playbook that works for one company and try to play it at a different company 10, 15 years later. And for us, it's really been about trying to build like a community around the product and what we're building. So we started off with like building an early waitlist for the product and then kind of seeding like what we were building. And our founders did a really fantastic job doing that very early on. So putting out a blog post and talking about the problem that they were trying to solve with Linear, and then ultimately creating a waitlist that people could join so that they could find out about the product once they were let off of it. So it created a lot of like anticipation and interest in the product, which is different than maybe what a lot of other companies do these days, which is just like launch, and hopefully the people will come. But I think in a lot of ways you can build a brand around a company in a very different way, and that can strike people as like something that's actually pretty unique and hasn't been done before.
I'll just add, and I'm an investor now, but I spent many years in startups. Startups were going up against really entrenched incumbents and legacy industries. So my perspective is definitely informed by both sides of the table. But especially in this very noisy time, right, a noisy media environment, like as a startup, you are fundamentally fighting for relevance from day one. You're fighting for attention. You have to have an amazing product, or there's really nothing to sort of wrap a brand around. But let's say you have built a magical product that a few users love. Well, brand building is all about starting a conversation. It's storytelling. It's how do you get people out there to just care about the message that you have. And so there's a couple different playbooks that I think different companies are using today. You can look at companies like Perplexity, Lovable, Suno in music. There's lots of great AI companies right now that are starting to get attention and using different methods for it. But largely it's, look, one, you can pick a fight. It's great to have an incumbent villain in your storytelling, right? You're the hero. Somebody's got to be the villain, or the story is not interesting. You can, stand for something in the world, something very like philosophical or principled, a mission that people are drawn to. You can be the most incredible advocate of your users, whoever they are, the customers, so they feel seen and heard and understood by you. There's a lot of ways to do storytelling, but the main thing is you have to do it. Products don't sell themselves. People don't just naturally discover you. You have to start a conversation that draws people in, makes them interested, and fundamentally makes them part of your movement. The movement is your startup.
I never thought of it like having a villain. I think that's a great way to put it. Generally, I think brands aren't built by brand building. Mm-hmm. They're built as a sort of quasi-religion.
Yeah.
You've got like this fanatical following, and they just believe in where this is going. And if you just think about the brands that we know today, most well. I think they almost always start that way. You think of Apple, you think of Tesla, you think of Stripe, you think of Midjourney, OpenAI, ChatGPT, etc. I think there's a common thread that you don't intentionally brand build. It just sort of happens as a consequence of a fantastic product and a real sense that people see where it's ultimately going.
Right. Well, you make it sound kind of easy, right? But well, you know how difficult it can be, right, from a technical perspective, to build a product that like truly delights people, right? And even, I guess, if you're able to do that, it's still, I would argue, hard to stand above, right? Because I see great models coming out for almost everything, like almost every day now, like great TTS open source models from like 2-person teams. Like it's amazing that these tools are so democratized that almost anyone can build. But maybe, Oliver, you can talk about, despite how clearly, insane the challenge is now, to build a product that works well, people love, stands out. Maybe you can tell us about how you're trying to do that, at your startup, which is a world model startup, so to speak. But perhaps you can give us some background on your company and kind of, what your approach has been to market.
Sure. I think our incumbent is not necessarily a single company, it's a medium. So what we're effectively building is what we believe to be the next form of entertainment. Right? We've had movies and video games and TV shows for decades now, and they can do we can do wonderful things with these mediums. And even so, there has been very little technical innovation in those mediums. The tools are really stagnant, the way things are done is really stagnant, all those sorts of things. So what we very much believe is that there's an opportunity for artificial intelligence to create this new medium, and we call it interactive video. And it's effectively video that's imagined by a model in real time that you can interact with. It's a sort of fusion of film and game. And it's all learned. There's no game engine under the hood, anything like that. So really, we're not competing against a single company in that sense. We're really competing for people's attention and their time and how they spend their hard-earned time entertaining themselves. And I don't know if that's easier or harder.
Yeah,
we'll find out.
Not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but so you don't see like Fei Li has a startup that is trying to accomplish maybe some of the same things that you described a second ago. I mean, Google DeepMind put out a demo like Genie, yep. Right? That could be used for some entertainment forms of it, right? Yeah, I mean, do you not see those as potential competitors down the line? Obviously, it's very early, but. Yeah. I'm curious to know.
I mean, in the sense that there is a category of models being developed and a series of applications that those models will enable, yeah, absolutely. Those are definitely competition for product, for R&D, for talent, all those sorts of things. I don't know, though. I think most startups typically die by suicide. Just your morbid way to think of it. But, the idea that there is a series of competition that just kill you in the early days in particular, I don't really believe in that. I think if you execute as well as you possibly can, work as hard as you possibly can, that will be the determinant of your success, I think.
Right. Would you agree, Cristina, do you think? I mean, like having, jumped around to like between a lot of major brands, right? And now you're at Linear and maybe you've seen like kind of the growth and progression there. Do you think you can be your own worst enemy when it comes to, when you're trying to decide as, a company on a strategy that ensures you stay in the conversation, remain relevant, even in the face, again, of like pretty intense competition?
Yeah. I mean, I think as a company, you really have to constantly be thinking about like why is someone else going to give a damn about what I have to say or what this company has to say in the market? And I think especially in AI, when things are just like shipping left and right, it's very easy to just look at everything and say, like, oh, isn't this just like that other thing that launched like last week or the week before? And it all just kind of like blends together. And you probably experience this more than anyone else when you're thinking about like, what do I write about? Like, what are the things that are interesting to people? And I think for a lot of companies, it's really easy to have like a foot fault where you don't really know how a particular space is going to play out. And that's like what we're all living in right now with AI. We don't know who's going to win. And also the companies that were like the startups, are the incumbents now, right? Like that's how quickly it can happen in this particular space where companies that were just getting started are now like the #1 player in the space and everyone's kind of going after them. And also you have a lot of companies that are building platforms that other people can build off of. And at the same time, they're also building tools that are competitive with the customers that they have, right? So I think in a lot of ways, there's probably more competition in this space than there ever has been. And I think there's always like a reason to kind of be looking over your shoulder and thinking about who's coming after you. But I think that's why the brand building piece is so important. Like you have to separate yourself from the noise and figure out how that's going to happen in your space very specifically. And then think about like, what are the things that could happen to my business that might change things? So in Linear's case, we're building products for people who build products. And in a lot of ways, you think about the disruption of like coding agents bringing into the space, and you can either decide like, are we going to embrace what's happening in the space, or are we going to challenge it and say, oh, actually, like, we don't know about this. Like, what if there are fewer engineers in the world tomorrow because of these coding agents? And maybe that's bad for like a seat-based business like ours, when in reality, we actually think the opposite is true. And so we're leaning into it and building a platform so that agents can interact with linear issues in a much faster fashion than you would experience with any other tool. And then when we power every single new AI company in the world today, the idea would be that they're building on us first, right? So I'd much rather lean into it rather than say, this is concerning for the business, because then otherwise you're just going to get left behind.
Right, makes sense. I would love to get the VC perspective on this. It must be, I can't even imagine being like a VC in this current, AI craziness, right? I read like a crazy stat the other day from PitchBook. I think between like February and now, like May alone, there have been like over 1,500 deals in North America, like investments in AI companies of all sizes. So the inbound must be, I can only imagine your inbox, but tell me how you make those decisions then, right? When you're probably so overwhelmed, you don't know where to start, right?
Yeah, it's a really good question because just the volume of startups and also the opportunity spaces in AI is just so massive right now. So the surface area for innovation is the widest I think it's ever been. And so there's a couple of things, and in all these spaces, fundamentally, they feel competitive, but I try to think about, in the same way that Jeff Bezos has like this great quote about what is Amazon really about, it's betting on the things that will never change, like consumers want like convenience at a low cost, right? So there's a version of that in venture investing and looking at startups, like what are the things that ultimately lead to really durable companies, generational companies, the kind of companies that we look back and like remember and like can't live without, Spotify, Uber, Netflix, right? First of all, just insanely talented teams who can adapt, who can pay attention to the competition without getting drawn into it and can just iterate, build really fast, product velocity, and build at the pace that the field is moving and actually be able to stay ahead of it. So it's product velocity, it's the quality and depth of the team, and it's frankly the level of ambition. There's a lot of incremental things that startups try to do. We really want to back the teams that are thinking big, long-term about how to create enduring companies, how to transform customer experiences in really profound ways, how to innovate on business models. And at the end of the day, like we also, show me what you can do, right? I think the quality of the product that you build, the craftsmanship that goes into it, like Linear, for example, very well-crafted product, like it says a lot about your future potential. So at the end of the day, our job is to distinguish sort of signal from noise. There is a lot of noise, but the reality is, there's also incredible companies that can withstand this competitive pressure that we're in right now and can both compete with everybody on the field, but also compete with large incumbents in order to create really amazing companies. And, we know it's true because we're seeing companies today scale from 0 to 100 million in ARR in less than 2 years, multiple companies, and we've just never seen that kind of growth in the past.
Yeah, like Anysphere, right? As of today.
Cursor?
Yeah. The creator of Cursor, the vibe coding assistant. Vibe coding is a weird and evolving term, I think. Like, I'm not even sure what it means anymore. But so here's a question for the entire panel, and maybe we can, reverse the direction. We can start with you, Oliver. I wonder, like, as observers of the space, right? Obviously, you're in it, but you're also like, I'm sure enthusiastic about it, and you pay attention to the news cycle. Are there any like AI technologies you think that are kind of too speculative to back right now, right? Or maybe like they're not going to take off because maybe the promises are running ahead of what the technology can actually deliver, right? I wonder about this from time to time, like. Manus, I feel like, is a good example, right? For those who aren't familiar, Manus is kind of like, it's an agentic platform. Basically, it uses a couple of different kinds of models to help you accomplish tasks. But, I've used it, and wow, the marketing was great, and, they got a lot of, like, people onboarded very quickly. At least for me, it fell short in some areas. So, I wonder if, any of you, each of you, can think of examples of that, right? Where, like, it'd be great to compete against, a startup perhaps would love to compete against a Google, like, in a particular area, but the technology is just too premature. Maybe it's too early to bet on that just yet.
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like you look at the dot-com boom, right? There was numerous companies that went public, and there wasn't much there. And the time in which to fulfill what they were trying to do was going to be really long, but they were talking about it as if it was really short, right? I think it's different now. I know that's maybe a bad thing to say, but the speed at which stuff is advancing, as cliche again as it sounds, is just absolutely genuinely unprecedented. To see this stuff go from bare bones prototype to something that's really impressive to like your grandma. Like that speed is like crazy fast now. So I don't know, I think any technology that has like a early variation that's janky, that's glitchy, that's broken, the speed at which it can become something useful to someone is really fast.
There have been so many tools I tried, just like you, where like the first time I try it, and I'm kind of like, this is fine, not that interesting, or it doesn't work exactly how I want it to, right? And I think the great thing about AI, and the thing that we've noticed even internally at Linear when we started working with some of the first like coding agents, like and using them ourselves, where we had this kind of reaction, was that you check in 3 months later, 6 months later, and the tool that you thought was kind of meh when you first started using it, like has actually progressed like very significantly, which is very different from how you launch products in other spaces or how you had done that historically, where like you get one shot with the customer. You get one shot with the customer to try your product and see if it works, and if it doesn't, they're never coming back again. And that's just not true in AI. Like, I think, like, you see all this chatter about products where it's like, I tried it, it wasn't interesting. And it's like, someone's like, oh, you got to try it again. Like, go sign up for it again and see if it's better. And then people do. And it is better. And so I think that's why you can't, in this space, like, really write anything off, because I don't think anyone can really predict what was maybe a subpar or, like, low-quality experience at a certain period of time, and that, like, actually advancing quite a bit in a short period of time.
I do think, back to the speculation point, I mean, we are long-term investors, right? We're investing in a company at seed or Series A today that, we don't know. There's a lot of risk built in. That's why we're excited to invest. The question is, like, if it works, is it transformative? If it works, is that a big company or product that billions of people around the world might want to use, right? So it's like, it's not speculative in nature, it's more like if then. If this works, how big can it be? That's an important question that we ask ourselves all the time. But I do think we have to separate kind of hype from sort of engineering problems that might be complex, but fundamentally, if you can solve it from an engineering perspective, could lead to something really magical, create a lot of customer value. And so I think for a lot of AI products, it is helpful to sort of think, is this just marketing hype? Or are they actually trying to solve like agents doing things on our behalf, while we sleep? Is that a really interesting engineering problem that if this team actually cracks it over time, could be an incredible product? And that's what we look for. There is a lot of marketing hype, though.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the vision you just described of agents doing things for you while you do sleep, I don't know, go about your daily life, that is wonderful, and I really hope we get there someday. And also to all of your points, things are improving very quickly. Which is exciting, from one point of view. From another point of view, it's like, oh my gosh. So with the time remaining, we don't have a ton. I thought maybe we could touch on the importance of partnerships, right? I think we've seen many examples in AI now of smaller company startup partnering with a larger one, let's say Google for compute, maybe AWS, or like just additional resources so they can reach new customers, right? Potential customers. And that's kind of like, it's kind of a weird thing, right? Because like it's like on the one hand, maybe they're competing with this partner. On the other hand, like maybe they couldn't do it alone, right? So I'm sure all of you have thoughts on that, but it seems like that can be a successful strategy depending on the nature of your AI business.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things in this particular space that are difficult to imagine one single company taking on all of them. I mean, even OpenAI with Stargate, they're partnering with lots of companies to make that happen. I think the most prevalent partnership in this world is compute. And I think it's, for the most part, a sort of simply an exchange of value, dollars for flops. But I think there's ways to do it in different ways. Like you can have the cloud providers be investors. Maybe you get prioritized access to new chips and new clusters and things like that. And then you've got distribution partnerships as well, for sure. But yeah, I think compute is the primary.
I think partnerships are incredibly important. They're like the unsung hero of building startups. Because in startups, like what is the inherent advantage you can have against a large established incumbent? It's speed. It's the ability to take risks, product risks that they can't take. But the challenge that you're dealing with is like, can the incumbent get innovation before the startup gets distribution? So the startup has to work on distribution, and partnerships are a great way to, one, accelerate product development, product partnerships that help you deliver a more complete solution to your customer or your user. Partnerships can help you grow and like reach your users, reach your customers, whether they're consumers or businesses. And they can also kind of help you gain negotiating power and leverage on a strategic chessboard, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? What are the alliances that you can create? And I think there's a lot of AI startups that have gotten creative with this. They've realized that there's kind of a rebel alliance that you can create against Google or against Meta or even against OpenAI to some extent. So you see companies teaming up on startup and developer programs, right? Pooling their resources, pooling their tools and credits, hosting events together, And so I think there's a lot of creative ways to partner with other startups and with strategics, that have shared interest or who might be interested in the innovation and disruption that you're bringing to their category in order to, be bigger than you are as a company, leverage their brand, their distribution, their marketing, but also reach your customers at scale. And I just don't think we talk about it enough, but actually funny story, Cristina and I originally met working on a partnership together when I think you were at Stripe and I was at Twitter. So
yeah. I think we both used to wear partnerships hats. And what was interesting coming into Linear, I was like, oh, like there's not that much in partnerships to do here. And we started out by just saying, like, we're going to build an API and we're going to make sure that that API is like open and accessible to everyone, and hopefully developers will start to build on it. And we took a very, kind of platform-oriented approach and not applying like a lot of human touch to it. And I think AI has really changed that for us. So in the last, 6 months or so, we've been partnering with a ton of companies and building out brand new sets of APIs, and then going to partners and saying, hey, do you want to be the first to build on this? And we can launch something together and go to market with it together. And that's been incredibly helpful for us. And just yesterday, OpenAI announced deep research integrations for the first time, and Linear was the only private company that was integrated. So it's Microsoft, it's Google, it's Linear, and like that is a great company to be in. So I think for us, we're also utilizing our customers, and in this case, OpenAI, to say like, why don't we actually transform a customer relationship into a partnership over time and start working together really closely. And so, from that perspective, I think you can actually start to work with a lot of companies in a really unique way and have advantages as a startup that otherwise you wouldn't have.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually do have some time left, and maybe I'll use this chance to get kind of parting thoughts, reflections on the state of AI in startup land, right? We've talked about a lot, but I think, my takeaway at least is like, it's not impossible to make noise, right? As a small player in a very big pond, right? What would you say to like a founder, right, who maybe is just getting started on their journey or is trying to break out, as they wake up every day and work on their product, right, but also are very cognizant of the fact that, people, their attention is split in a million different directions, not just because of AI, just because of how we consume media today. What would you say to someone like that to, in terms of words of wisdom or advice? If you could keep it brief, that would be ideal.
My sense is many people have really interesting ideas. They very rarely ship them. They may ship like a tiny little prototype and put it in front of a few friends, but they get some negative feedback and then they kill it, and maybe they move on to something else. And I think ultimately what differentiates the really great companies is they ship something they're really proud of. And if I'm a first-time founder today, I'm thinking, how can I get something out there that people start to love? It might be a very small group of people, but a very small group of people start to love and just build on that momentum.
It's still just so early. I know everything looks competitive and super noisy, and sometimes it looks that way for investors too, but I think the reality is like we're still very, very early in this AI wave. There's so much more to be built in consumer AI applications. There's so much more to be built in vertical software, tools for small and medium-sized businesses, bringing AI into legacy industries. It's just about, like, I would encourage you to find a problem, a big, complex problem that couldn't be solved before, now potentially could be solved with AI, that you really care about, you're passionate about, and focus on that versus the noise in the startup ecosystem.
Yeah. For me, I would say it's really about thinking about what you as a company can be truly great at. And I think in AI, as an example, it's really easy for people to look and say, like, speed, like, we're going to be the fastest. And it's like, well, everyone's kind of going for speed right now. So, like, how are you going to be different? And, for Linear, it's been about craft and quality, and that takes time. So, for us, it's not just about speed, and figuring out, like, what's special for you is, I think, a key part of your success.
For sure. Well, thanks all of you for joining for this discussion. Thank you for staying till the end, everyone. It was great. I learned a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.